Chad, welcome to the program, sir. How are you?
Good. Is this Glenn?
Yes, you're on. How are you, sir?
Glenn, how are you? I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Glenn.
You bet. Where are you right now?
I am down in the Woodlands, Texas.
Okay, good. You're home.
I'm home.
I saw you about 4 weeks ago, and you had just come from the front lines over in Ukraine. And I said, "What are you seeing?" And you said, "Well, I'm not seeing really any significant American relief."
And I'm not, no. And that was the same on this trip, Glenn. And it's really, it's not only sad and unfortunate. It needs to be addressed. I mean, there is no congressional oversight on this money. This money is going into a black hole, and in any country in the world, it would be
bad.
It would be bad. I mean, people are people, and governments are corrupt, and that's going to end up where it shouldn't. And the money's not ending up where it's going. It's U.S. taxpayers' dollars, billions of dollars. And not only that, it's being sent because it's needed. It's needed to save lives and restore humanity, and it's not being used for that.
So, do you think that's us, or do you think that's them, or a combination of the two?
I think it's a combination of the two. You know, I've been getting a lot of slack from people like, "Why are you over in Ukraine helping? Ukraine's a corrupt country." I'm like, well, you know where else is corrupt? Washington, D.C. You know, governments are corrupt around the world. Certainly, Ukraine has had a history of corruption, and it's been a hotbed of money laundering and things like that. But so is Washington, D.C. And the fact that this money is not being audited or accounted for or has any kind of oversight just leaves room for corruption, both in Ukraine and Washington, D.C. And I think it would not be difficult at all. We have an embassy back in Ukraine now. It would not be difficult to have correct congressional oversight over these funds and make sure they go to the right place. It's needed. I do believe the money is needed there. I know not everyone agrees with that, but we have. I believe we should be supporting these people, not in the realm of the money that we are giving them. I think that was too big of a blank check, and a lot can be done with a lot less money.
Oh, yeah.
But it actually has to get to where it belongs. And I just, as Mighty Oaks, and Mercury One, you guys help us financially, Glenn, and we just brought $20,000 in medical supplies to special operations on the front line. When I say medical supplies, IFACs, individual first aid kits, to go into troops because they don't have them, and they're like, please give us anything. So not only did we bring $20,000 worth of IFACs to give to the Special Forces unit, but we brought a ER trauma doctor who trains Army Special Forces medics. We brought him with us to teach them how to use that. And that's something that we did. We did that trip for maybe it cost us $40,000 to do that trip. And they were so thankful for that. They were like, that's life-saving training that we were able to give them. And meanwhile, billions of dollars isn't reaching them. Why can't those billions of dollars go to things like that?
Yeah, because it's going through governments and dirty hands every step of the way. You're also delivering something else along with the medical care, are you not?
That's right. We, Mighty Oaks does. For U.S. service members, we've done over 400,000 active duty U.S. service members with our spiritual resiliency program. And in 2016, we decided to bring this to our allied troops around the world. We went to Ukraine before in 2017 and 2018 to do this, and so now we're back there in the front lines. And we go there. A typical day will be we'll give them some classes that are non-lethal aid, like bailout procedures for the personal safety, medical classes. We'll give them resources and supplies. And then we'll give them resources that are spiritual. We give out the audio Bible sticks to them and some other resources to help work on their mental and spiritual health. And at the end of the day, once we build that rapport with them all day, we're able to talk to them veteran to veteran, combat veteran to combat veteran, peer to peer about spiritual resiliency and mental resiliency. That way they can stay in the fight to protect their homes and their families and their freedom. And, we know from our experience as warfighters and, after 20 years of war that we just went through, that there's a lot of things you can have on the battlefield, but nothing's more essential than having a strong spiritual foundation. And we were able to share the gospel of Christ, with these guys.
Chad, tell me about the war crimes that you witnessed.
I've been seeing this since February, since we've been going there, Glenn, but nothing worse than the last two trips because I'm getting more into the front lines. I just was in a Zoom. I was 2 hours east of the Zoom, which is pretty much Russia, and that had been occupied for 6 months. And some of the areas we saw, and I'll get to the mass graves, but one of the things that I think is important to know is I'm not exaggerating when I say this, every home every hospital, every school, every structure. It's almost impressive as somebody that's been in combat. Impressive to say they hit every single structure, and these aren't military targets; these are civilians.
By the way, we're showing some videos on Blaze TV right now. Some of them are graphic, so look away. But I've seen these earlier, and
3 apartment buildings.
Yeah, the apartment buildings. I mean, what you're saying is true. There's really nothing left. Nothing. It's all rubble. And you say that's different than usual in wars like this?
Absolutely. I mean, even the Taliban isn't this brutal. I mean, the Taliban attack civilians. It's terrorism. They want to intimidate people, but this isn't intimidation. This is. I mean, you're talking like some of those buildings in the videos you've seen look like 2 buildings. It's 1 building. It's a 5-story building blown out to the ground. And this was women and children and civilians living in it. And this wasn't one that was accidental. This is every apartment building in the area had airdropped missile right into the roof of that apartment building that blew it to the ground and killed thousands of civilians. And this isn't being reported. I'm happy you're allowing me to give this news right now, but it's not being reported. And then, so this is not collateral damage. This is not, indiscriminate fire. This is direct targeting of civilian complexes and civilians, which is a war crime. And, in the international courts, the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and the UN needs to be stepping in because this should never be allowed, regardless of Ukraine, Russia, political sides, none of that. This should never be allowed in this point of our civilization to attack civilians this way. And after we spent the day, I was with the Chief Vadim, who's the chief of the entire law enforcement for all of Ukraine. He'd be essentially over like the FBI, CIA, everything for all of Ukraine. And he was sent there by the government to make sure they secured a Zoom after they recaptured it. So we were with him as I drove to meet him. Myself and my partner are driving in this combat area to meet him, and 2 MiG fighters flew over. They did a gun run, dropped bombs over. I've been in a lot of war zones. I've never had enemy air over us. I mean, we always controlled the air, so that was kind of a pretty crazy scenario for me. We had a Hind helicopter fly by. We get to the front. We're with them while they're fighting. We're getting shelled and rocketed within 100 meters of us, and the small arms fire. And you've probably seen some of the videos I sent with. I probably counted about 60 Russian soldiers. They were like 18, 19, 20 years old. It's sad to know that many of them probably don't even know why they were there, and they were dead or dying. And one of the things I did see of the Ukrainians as we were moving forward, and they were dying Russian soldiers, they were rendering aid, and that shows who's the good guys because these guys are rendering aid. Meanwhile, these Russians had occupied their homes and killed their family members for 6 months. And the Ukrainians are still rendering aid. I thought that really stood out to me. Who's on the right side?
I want to play a clip from you out on the field where you're talking about mass graves. Here it is.
This area is 1,200 people were missing from this area. They found 1,100 bodies in this area, and they were burned before they're buried. So you can tell they tried to destroy the evidence of the mass killings. Most of the people their hands were tied, some in front of their backs, some behind their backs, in executed style. So we're not just talking about ballistic missiles and shelling, which we've seen. I've seen firsthand driving through cities that are just leveled to rubble, civilian targets, civilian neighborhoods. But we're talking beyond that, just with indirect fire, and this is not indiscriminate fire because we drove through areas, and me and my teammate are driving through, they strategically hit every structure, every house, every building, every school, every hospital. But now beyond that, once they take these areas, they're bringing these civilians out here in the woods, tying their hands behind their back, and executing them, burning their bodies to hide the evidence, putting them in mass graves.
You saw these people with their hands tied behind their backs you saw this yourself?
I saw it myself, Glenn. Yeah, and There were two mass graves that we were brought to. One was 474 people. They counted specifically. The other was estimated about 1,100 people, and mostly all civilians. Mostly because most of the men would have been out fighting. Most of them were women, a lot of children, and it appeared what they were using the graves for. When I say 1,100 people, I don't think they killed 1,100 people one time, but I think over 6 months they did was, as they arrested people, they brought them there. Probably bound and handcuffed, and then would kill them on that side, just push them in as a place of disposal. That would be my. I don't have evidence of that, but that'd be my interpretation from what I saw it happen. And then as Ukraine came in and it was retaking that area, and it appeared they tried to burn the bodies to maybe hide the evidence. But burning bodies is harder than it sounds. You got to use a lot of fuel, and so then they tried to bury it, and then they vacated the area. When I say they vacated, they must have left in a hurry because they left 74 tanks in this area.
Chad, what do we do?
This to me, Glenn, this only gets worse. Russia's losing, so I think Putin has to show strength. So I think the only scenarios is that he's going to escalate and do something radical, even more radical than this. Or you have the other scenarios. You have Zelensky, who can't, because Zelensky, in the eyes of Ukraine, they're winning. And as they're winning, he's not going to go to the negotiation table. So it would also require Putin to do something that would force him to the negotiation table. But I think what we could do as a world, and I don't mean as America, but as a world, is NATO needs to accept Ukraine in the NATO, or the UN and the International Criminal Court needs to recognize these war crimes and these human rights violations and hold Putin accountable. And that's what the UN's for. That's what the International Criminal Court is for these exact scenarios. But we're not seeing them take action. So what we could do, you and I, is exactly what we're doing right now, is exposing this. I believe if I would have not leaked this information to Fox, if I would have reported it right to United States government, or it would have been swept away because they don't want it to be known, because if it's known, then they have to do something about it. And so we need to, make sure that there's reporting from the front lines. Unfortunately, journalists can't make it to a lot of these areas because it's so volatile, and I get that, but the reporting needs to be exposed, and our government needs to be held accountable for these billions of dollars, so that Ukraine could. If our government's going to decide to give this money, then it needs to go where it belongs. Again, I think you and I both agree that this much money makes the problem worse. But if we are going to give it, then give it and have good oversight. If we're going to have an international criminal court system, then use it for times like this. The UN, this is what it's for. This is what the UN's for. And I also believe NATO at this point should accept Ukraine. And by the way, in the last, I think just a couple of days ago, President Zelensky applied again for Ukraine to be accepted into NATO.
Chad, thank you so much for doing everything that you do. I know your heart is in the right place. I know who you serve. And I can't imagine what this does for somebody who went through PTSD to be over there again and seeing these things. So I appreciate your service to him and to us. So thank you so much, Chad.
Thank you, gang. God bless, and thanks for all your support, too. We couldn't do it without you.
You got it. The Mighty Oaks Foundation, he's the founder and CEO, co-founder of Save Our Allies. You can follow him at Save Our Allies or saveourallies.org.